Nolan's a genius, and I thought if I had even an iota of chance of understanding how exactly he thinks, I should probably take all his movies and bust them open on Premiere Pro. Almost every film Christopher Nolan makes has its own unconventional storytelling style and editing structure. This creates a mad viewing experience with enhanced narrative tension and thematic exploration that you won't find anywhere else. After breaking down Memento on Premiere Pro, I thought I'd extend the same thinking down to Dunkirk as well. Dunkirk redefines war cinema through its innovative storytelling that intersects three distinct chronologies, one spanning a week, another a day, and the third an hour. By analyzing the interwoven timelines, we can see how exactly Nolan puts audience engagement at forefront using editing. Let's explore how he masterfully crafts an immersive story of the harrowing evacuation of Allied soldiers from the beaches of Dunkirk during the Second World War.
You can practically see it from here. What? Home.
So here's the latest episode in this sub-series called Edit Table, where I break films down on Premiere Pro and delve into the impact of editing on storytelling. Welcome to Frame by Frame, where today we talk about Nolan's Dunkirk. We all know about Nolan's obsession with time. Movie after movie, whether it's Inception, where he conveniently was able to use dreams to layer the narrative in that form, or Interstellar, where planetary movements gave him an excuse to f with the audience. And I'm not even going to talk about Tenet.
That part is a little dramatic.
So let's see how he uses his obsession with time in Dunkirk. Honestly, it's the editing of Dunkirk that allows him to layer his story the way he did. I mean, there's a reason why legendary editor Lee Smith won the goddamn Oscar for Best Film Editing for this movie. At a macro level, Smith and Nolan very seamlessly interweave three timelines, like I mentioned before: a week, a day, and an hour. But at a micro level, they cut between those scenes across each timeline in such a way that together they build more tension and drama. This layering creates a rising momentum of intensified suspense, which is further heightened by Hans Zimmer's ticking stopwatch background score. And while I can go on and on about the ticking time effect itself and how it crescendos on scene after scene, very complementary to what's happening in the visuals, and about Zimmer's genius in leveraging the Shepard tone, of course. By the way, you can check out this mad deep dive by Vox on the Shepard tone and how Hans Zimmer created that effect. I'm a sidestep and focus on the narrative and story a little bit more because that's the agenda of the video. So this rising crescendo that I was referring to, Nolan calls this the Snowball effect. I wanted to write a script that braids together three storylines that are continually rising in anxiety and intensity. When one is peaking, the other is starting to build, and the third is entering the last phase. So here's a snippet of Nolan from another interview building on that same thought.
It's necessary to divide a point of view into three different strands, really: land, sea, and air. So with each strand, you're telling the story intensively by cross-cutting these 3 points of view and having them come together at different points. You start to build up the bigger, more coherent picture of what the events of Dunkirk would have been.
Everyone knows that Nolan didn't set out to make a war film with Dunkirk, but a suspense thriller, a survival film. That's why he stayed away from blood and grotesque that's normally associated with action films. What he chose to embrace instead was a very convoluted way of telling a very simple story, so that he could make that thriller film that he set out to. And praise the Lord he did.
Where are we going?
Dunkirk.
No, we're going to England. I'm not going back. I'm not going back.
Additionally, he focused more on the events that the characters are experiencing, which is typically a little alien in film. Normally, films are written from the perspective of the character. and we focus on the character experiencing an event. That's why there are no names, no association with the people directly, just a bunch of soldiers who we don't even know, but are immersed in the situation with them, still rooting for them and hoping they get out of it. Not because we have any association to them, but because we feel the despair that they are in because of the situation itself, the macro event, so to say. Here's the man describing why he thinks talking through the POV of the character is not the only way to make the audience care about the character.
We wanted the language of suspense, which is the most visual of cinematic languages. You can create empathy for character just by virtue of the physical situation. You know, my feeling was, okay, you don't need characters who come on screen and through dialogue make the case for why you should care about them.
And because he didn't take the angle of a single protagonist like a lot of his past films or most movies in general, it allows him to tell this event from the perspective of anyone and everyone who was there in that situation. And leveraging this angle very smoothly, he goes about his merry way of splitting into the three main story timelines with its umpteen characters and opportunities to show various incidents. While it's obvious from the get-go that there are three timelines, the way we move from one to the other can get a little tricky to kind of follow, especially because of how he's cross-cut between the timelines to create that snowball effect. And we'll see a lot more of that going forward. But the reason why I think this chart will help us is just to kind of understand how these three storylines are actually connected with each other and where exactly they intersect. So these become important milestones basically for us to keep track of the movie's chronology, right? And to experience those incidents from different points of view. As you can see over here, the 1 hour storyline of air and the 1 day storyline of the sea intersect first, followed by an intersection between the sea storyline and the land storyline. And then there is the intersection point of all three of them together. And at the very end of the film, we see how land and air intersect. Just at the very end when the pilot, the role that Tom Hardy is playing, of course, is caught at the beach. We'll see this on Premiere Pro shortly, but I hope this gives you a little bit of an idea of the construct itself and why Lee Smith and Christopher Nolan chose to tell the story this way. Best to dive in with some context so that we could truly appreciate their wild and bold decisions. By the way, if you enjoyed this analysis so far, we'd really appreciate a quick like and subscribe. That way, content like this could reach more people who are interested in film and breakdowns on all things creative. Moving onwards with Dunkirk. Another crucial facet to watch out for is its powerful parallelism. The film often juxtaposes scenes from different timelines based on thematic connections to create that suspenseful contrast. This technique effectively integrates the narratives, building tension and compelling viewers to draw connections between seemingly separate events. A quick sidestep just to go a little deeper into two scenes and better understand what exactly that meant. So here's one instance. In this scene, for example, we can see how in the first shot, the fighter plane comes crashing down, whereas in the other, it's on the rise. Two different shots and completely different times, but spliced together based on the thematic connection to give you a contrasting emotion, bang, one after the other. Here's another example. A scene where the good guys are drowning because of the Germans shooting at the tiny vessel for target practice. And with Tom Hardy's partner getting shot down in some other timeline, but basically showing both sets of characters drowning, creating double anxiety. Alright, so now a quick look of it on Premiere Pro. I kid you not, doing this exercise, as much as it may have taken some time, it was a lot of fun. And I really learned a thing or two about why some of the decisions were made behind the film's flow. So as you can see here, the beige snippets on the timeline represent land, the 1 week storyline. The blue snippets representing sea, the 1 day storyline. And the cyan snippets represent air, the 1 hour timeline. In the first half of the film, we can see how it consistently cuts between all three timelines in a repetitive pattern. Land, sea, air, land, sea, air, land, sea, air. And only from the second half of the film do you see a lot more dynamism as we transition from one storyline to another. And that's based a lot more on the emotion of the scene itself and the intersection points of each timeline, like the examples we just talked about. So as you can see from this scene, gotten a little bit of a sneak peek into what could potentially happen down the line, you're already at the edge of the seat. The job is already half done in terms of creating that suspense and anticipation. What's happening is because of this, Nolan and Smith are very literally able to foreshadow the story for you. But more importantly, because you've already seen the outcome of a particular encounter in one timeline, you know there's an impending threat looming in the other timeline. And the genius has just gotten you hooked at the edge of your seat, waiting to see that impending doom. It's a theme that he's used throughout the film, like I mentioned before, to create that rising tension and suspense. Here's a quick look at another scene at a very tiny scale. So as you can see, within a single shot itself, forget about cutting between timelines, as the shell comes closer and closer, there's this anxiety built for the life of the soldier itself. Now imagine this happening at the scale of the whole goddamn movie. What a trip. By the way, thank God he stuck to chronology to some extent with Dunkirk, unlike in Oppenheimer, where not only is he cutting between different timelines, but also moving back and forth between each timeline. And I got a little bit of an analysis of that as well coming up. I mean, if you're watching this in the future, a few months from when this video was released, then hopefully it's already on the playlist frame by frame and in the description box. But onwards with Dunkirk on Premiere Pro. If Dunkirk were to have been edited in proper chronological order, with each of the timelines arranged as per the story's flow, then the timeline would look something like this, with each of these markers over here showing all those intersection points. So as you can see, because the first timeline itself is a week long, a lot of the very beginning stuff, at least chronologically, would have ideally been of the first week itself. And then you start seeing the day of the sea coinciding with the last day of the week of the land. And then after that, you see the final 1 hour of the air storyline coming into the mix as well. And this is where you see that first intersection between the sea and air storylines, where the pilot who crashes eventually comes up on the same boat as the rest of the characters that we are following in the main sea storyline. Then as we move a little ahead, you get to see stuff that's happening on land, on sea, on air. And then this is where, in particular, the land and sea intersection happens. Right? Where the folks on land see the rescue party in the form of the tiny ferries and ships and boats coming towards them. And then you see the intersection of all three storylines, where the massive oil liner just kind of crashes and there's the explosion, which we also see from the perspective of the pilot in air. And then comes the very end, like I mentioned earlier, where the pilot eventually surrenders to the Germans. But as you can see, even if it were told chronologically, the amount of intersection that actually exists between all these storylines. So the reason why I did this was actually just to show you how we would have lost that entire crescendo of scene from one to the other depending on the theme had we gone chronologically this way, which is why Lee Smith and Christopher Nolan chose to go the other way. So as you can see, Dunkirk compresses time to heighten emotional intensity. The 1 week storyline on the beach is marked by prolonged waiting, despair and survival, effectively conveying the soldier's anguish. And in contrast, the 1 hour storyline in the air creates a frenetic pace, mirroring the intensity of dogfights and adding to the film's impact. The editing enables Nolan to manipulate time's passage, thereby modulating the audience's emotional engagement. The film's innovative approach to narrative structure, achieved through powerful editing, offers viewers a wild perspective on the evacuation's heroism.
What do you see? Home.
And the human's capacity for hope more than anything else, really. And by interweaving these timelines in this fashion, Nolan and Smith show everybody how editing serves as a very potent tool to create an immersive and impactful cinematic journey.
We shall defend our island whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall never surrender.
Hope you liked this breakdown of Dunkirk on Premiere Pro. If you did, don't forget to check out the one that we've done on Memento.